Welcome once again to the Radical Imagination. I'm your host, Jim Vrettos. I'm a sociologist at John Jay College here in New York City. The progressive left seems to have considerable trouble discussing and bringing in the ideas of love, sex, and relationships to their vision of community change, transformation, and revolution. Class struggle, economic justice, voting rights, saving the earth, ending mass incarceration, and numerous other political and economic themes are fair game for debate and struggle, and rightfully so. But most people and political visions of the world, not just the left, seem to have dismissed love, sex, and relationships, or find it not much of a part of their political, economic, moral, or intellectual agenda. We at the Radical Imagination think they're missing an enormous part of what it means to be human, and major discussions are needed on these topics by the political and spiritual progressive left to help transform and bring about a better world. What's love got to do with it? A lot. I've invited two of my favorite people in the world to the Radical Imagination to discuss how they've spent their lives and careers furthering our understanding and capacity in our communities to have love, sex, and great relationships. Felipe Luciano has been a lover of his community and people since his youthful days as chairman and Young Lords activist, and continued through the years as one of New York City's iconic media personalities, activists, journalist, and poet. His life and activism seem to have come full circle when appointed in 1997 by then Mayor Giuliani to a task force created to facilitate discussions among civilians and police officers about police behavior. Felipe was quoted as saying, "God has blessed me." He's continued being blessed and blessing others as a recent graduate of Union Theological Seminary and is presently the brand new host of the Friday morning show on WBAI radio. And I'm also so very happy to welcome once again to the Radical Imagination a person who has profoundly blessed and enabled me to understand the ultimate power that love, sexuality, and a great relationship can play in the happiness of life and how it can help bring about a more humane, just, and loving world. She's an author, psychotherapist, sex therapist in private practice, and a major media personality in both mainstream and alternative media. She's appeared on The Comedy Show with Jon Stewart and Samantha Bee, Geraldo, Gretchen Carlson, and countless other mainstream media appearances as an expert consultant. She presently is the host of the Ask Beatty show on Progressive Radio Network, and she's transformed my life beyond my wildest radical imagination when I asked her to share a lifetime and beyond of love. And she said yes. Welcome, Felipe and Beatty, to the Radical Imagination.
Thank you, Jim.
It's quite an intro, right?
It's a wonderful intro.
It's one of the best I've ever seen you do.
Oh, well,
I've seen a few.
You
this
two
was
are the
wonderful.
best. Come on, this
Thank
is
you.
unbelievable. And I'm so fond of you both and the interesting connections you have, in a sense, both as involved in the alternate media and the mainstream media, coming from communities of struggle, and involved in transformative and healing movements as well. So I'm so impressed by your lives and your careers, and I want to explore the issues of love and relationships and healing, and of course sexuality and great relationships in our society and our community.
You want to jump in first?
Well,
Yes.
when I first began, after I did my graduate and postgraduate work at McGill University in Montreal, I started off in the inner city world, okay, where people
in Montreal,
in Montreal, where people primarily, were really struggling not only emotionally and psychologically and in the relationships, but economically as well. And in the last over 35 years, you know, I have treated some of the, in quotes, most successful, wealthiest people in this country. And the thing that is so interesting is that other than waiting for the checks to arrive, to put, you know, food on the table for the kids, in terms of relationship knowledge, relationship success, sexuality, there are absolutely no differences at all between my original inner city group and the rich and the famous and, in quotes, the successful people that I have treated over the years. We're all not doing so well in the area of relationships and sexuality.
I
Do you
think-
agree with that?
I agree 100%.
Economics doesn't make a difference.
No.
Culture.
In fact,
No.
economics may actually hinder. There are two barriers to a fulfilling sexuality. One is extreme poverty, and the other is extreme extreme wealth. You end up with barriers to expressing yourself fully. I'm so happy that you brought up this whole question of the left refusing to deal with the issues of sexuality, love, and family. How many children do we have who were abandoned by ideology? That is, we went out to fight the wars, not thinking of what that effect would have on our children. And there are many children who are movement children who have been disillusioned by the
That's a
movement.
great point.
Totally
They've been
disillusioned.
neglected.
Do not want to hear about politics and are fairly liberal, but are not really involved. So there's no legacy of revolutionary leadership, as there would be, for example, if someone were a musician or if someone were a rabbi or a minister. In terms of the leftness of the movement, there's been no legacy. Children got sick of being left alone while their mothers and fathers went out to fight the good fight. Two, sexuality is something that we don't like to talk about. And I think that the warriors, those who are actually doing the war, have a tremendous amount of libido, and it's not talked about for fear that they will be called chauvinists. If they're women, they're going to be called freakazoids, whatever it is. How can you contain the energy, the yin and
Life
yang in you?
force,
How can you? It's going to express itself. Now, either it's going. And by the way, this has nothing to do with gender. You can be heterosexual, you can be gay, you can be transgender. The sexuality, as Freud says, has to come out. And you know, Freud's sort of a simplification of his theory was either you are making love or you're fighting, one or the other. And I found that, while not to be true in all cases, is basically an adage that we should look at seriously. I have found people who are sexually repressed and do not admit to their sexuality. And by the way, Beatty, this happens a lot among Latinos. We are a sensual people. We are an erotic people. We are a sexual people. But maybe we dress sometimes a little too flamboyantly, but there's a tremendous amount of sensuality there that we will not admit to. Now, what we get mad at is that the outside world will come up with the theory of us as hot. That's a hot Latin girl. Having no idea of what the sensuality is behind that. We're free. And all of the cultures that Europe came into contact with that were free were demolished because of their guilt and their repressive Christianity. It's something that it should be studied. I'm pretty sure Margaret Mead went into it. Gauguin certainly got caught up in what I call the stereotype of sexuality and sensuality with the Tahitians, and eventually died of syphilis. So many, but there's a tremendous amount of sensuality and love and pure fun. Fun in
Among
sexuality has
okay.
been drowned, has been literally drilled out of us.
I think
by
what I call false ideology.
False ideology.
Well, not just by false,
What do you think?
ideology. In fact, for example, in France, couples have sex twice a week. In the United States, take a guess, how many times?
Once a month.
Twice a month.
Twice a month,
Okay.
okay.
There was a Johns Hopkins study, okay, and they looked at 100 happy and very happily married couples. So these were not people who were in therapy. They were only participating in a study, at least on a conscious level, okay?
Right.
So what were the findings? 50% of these happy and very happily married women had difficulty becoming aroused.
Half
Half.
of the happy ones.
And very happy, okay?
Very happy ones. Okay.
The happy
Wow.
and very happy.
Think about the sad ones.
35% of these happy and very happily married women said that they had difficulty experiencing orgasm. 15% could not experience orgasm under any circumstances
That's
at
so
all.
sad.
With the men, happy, very happily married men, supposedly, a third of the men had problems with premature ejaculation. I can cure that problem in no time at all. So that was 33.33% of the men. And listen to this statistic, 52% of men between the ages of 40 and 70 had issues with
Erectile
With
dysfunction.
erectile
Yes.
dysfunction,
Yes.
which is a whole other subject. And of course, it's beyond the need to just go and get a prescription of Viagra. And men who are listening to the show, they really, really need to understand that they have to have a urologist check them out, and they also need to make sure that there is no blockage. There's
Right.
no blockage in the heart, because you have to wonder, why is
And
it?
that there's no blockage in the mind.
And in the mind.
Because that'll do it to you.
Exactly.
That'll do it to you. Look,
Exactly.
the repression,
exactly.
right?
it's the daily obstructions, the accumulative effect of poverty, the cumulative effect of having to work to put food on the table.
Right.
It is what most men outside of the dominant culture do is constantly rate themselves via what is happening in the dominant culture.
Yeah.
Or what they think is happening.
Or what they think is
in the
happening.
dominant
Because when you
culture.
look at commercials, commercials have the insidious effect of worming themselves into your subconsciousness. So when you look at a commercial and it has to do with the cleaning agent, you look at a kitchen that is the size of your entire apartment.
Right, right. So you're
Right.
constantly comparing
You're
yourself
constantly
Right.
comparing
to this
yourself.
fantasy
You look at
and feeling
and,
less.
and you look at the car coming into the garage. It's a two-car garage.
Yeah, yeah,
it's
yeah.
a circular or straight
Right.
stairway going up. This is fab. Now they're
Yeah.
doing it with black kids, which is even worse. Now they have black families and multiracial families in commercials doing
Yeah,
this.
yeah, yeah.
The point is that even I, as a man who's of, as we say, the hecho, I'm an adult, I'm a senior. Look at these things, and it even begins to affect me. I begin to compare myself. Why aren't I in that position? Why don't I have 3 cars, 2 homes, and all of this stuff? It is a fairy tale, particularly concerned with respect to earning potential. And look at what happened in this election.
And they
Those
connect to one's masculinity. Is that what
your
you're saying, too?
masculinity is defined by your title,
Yeah.
how much you make, your net worth, and whether you can take care of a family. Are you a nurturer? Are you a good earner? In our community, both black and brown, I would say, it's also determined by your standing in the community, by your ability to take care of yourself physically, but mainly by your ability to take care of your family. That is what I meant. What is your relationship to community? So there's an added dimension there. And for many of us, that we fall behind because we're constantly comparing ourselves to what the American ideal of masculinity is. He is a stalwart citizen. He goes to church. He has 3.5 kids with 1 dog. His wife is okay. He's not fooling around. It's all a lie. And when you look at the scandals that you see in politics, you realize that it's a lie. But the dominant culture, dominant media continues to perpetrate this lie. And so here I am with everything from tax bills to my kids' schooling to the apartment that I have to take care of. This is a difficult thing. Most of us are renting. We don't own anything. Our equity was shot in 2008 with the scandal, with the big housing scandal. 66% of all Latinos lost their equity. So we're way behind the 8 ball on that.
You
And
see,
you found this true also
what-
clinically?
Well, I think
Felipe
that
said?
obviously, socioeconomics, it plays a huge part in our lives. However, there are many other issues that really have to be looked at. For example, if people are not in a good place emotionally, psychologically, psychiatrically, if they're dealing or not dealing with the depression and the anxiety and the untreated bipolar disorder and sexual issues and early child sexual abuse and domestic violence kinds of things, the majority of men and women are not exactly going to be, eager to jump into bed and have sex. if our relationships are not in a good place, again, for the majority of women, we're not going to want to just jump in and have sex with somebody who we're angry with, we're disappointed with them, we can't stand them.
And ignored by.
And ignored by. You know, other things that people really have to think about, for example, are all the prescription medications and the over-the-counter medications, the cholesterol medications, the antidepressant medications, the high blood pressure medications. And you know, that was so interesting on one of my radio shows. I had a urologist on who was talking about a study that was done by the American Urological Association. There were 2,000 men who had literally just come from seeing their urologist. And guess what? 85% of these men were never asked about their sex lives. I mean, here you have these guys, they're going to see their urologist. You know, they were probably embarrassed and they were waiting for the doctor to say, you know, how are things going in the bedroom. So there are a lot of factors. The
Can't
hormones.
talk about with the doctor. You're not going to talk to the priest about it.
Not in 5 minutes.
No.
Not
because
in a 5 minute,
because the priest and the doctor and the rabbi usually are not trained clinically in sexuality.
Exactly.
Right.
And you have to be careful with them.
Exactly.
You don't know if what you tell them is going to go to the congregation. You don't know if that priest is going to try to molest your boy, your little girl, or your wife. You don't know. There's a whole tradition in black Protestantism about preachers and congregants.
Because you were raised as a Pentecostal.
I was raised as a Pentecostal, and we saw a lot of scandals and a lot of hanky-panky in my church.
You did.
And there was a repression. I saw the separation of sexes in the old Hasidic Pentecostal church.
We should add that Beatty was raised Orthodox.
She was raised Orthodox also.
Jewish,
From Winnipeg.
right, from
So, but
Winnipeg.
and it's the same thing. When my religion, my specific religion, was Puerto Rican Pentecostalism, which is like a Hasid. It's like the Lubavitch or the Satmars. I mean, it's really strict. Men stood on this side. Women said no makeup, no jewelry. Beatty, you'd be out. You could not. No pants, nothing. No makeup. Baseball, jewelry, the movies. We couldn't go to the movies. I remember we were part of a baseball team. The minister disbanded it because he felt it was going to induce devilish behavior. We couldn't go to the movies because it would subliminally, it would make us sexual animals. My mother, when I was in the 6th grade, I was salutatorian for my class, PS 170 on 112th Street between 5th and Lenox. I was supposed to be the major speaker. The salutatorian is the second smartest guy. Okay. And they gave me the right to do the speech. But I was more interested in the ball. There was going to be a prom. I was so happy. I was going out with a little girl named Joanne. I thought she was the most beautiful 13, thing. Yeah. She was blue-black, but had this kind of a sheen that was people who have seen this will understand what I'm saying. She had the kind of a skin that was translucent. You could see through her skin. You could see your own face in her skin. I just loved her. Her teeth were gorgeous. She was beautiful.
Where's she now?
I have no idea. No idea. I met one.
Because we're only about 10 blocks away.
10 blocks away. I've met 1, 2, Dalcida, and there was another one named Jesse. I've met 1 or 2. But I was in love, and I was dying to go there. My mother comes in at about 2 in the morning and says, God told me.
Yeah.
Talk about sexuality. God told me that this is just an excuse for you to touch each other, for boys and girls to touch each other. Well, of course. Hello. Yeah. But I said, Mom, and I kept my eyes closed, Mom, this is not God. This is you. And she said, are you going against God's word? Now, in my house, you don't go against God's word, which comes out of my mother. She's the oracle, right? My brother wet the mattress. We both slept together. He wet on the mattress because he was so terrified. My mother beat the living daylights out of me.
Because of your
because I said I was going to the prom. Now she's don't get me wrong, I love my mother. No, right. That was her way.
She was doing right
by her. She was keeping me from becoming a demon, that this was demon possession. She told me the devil has entered this house and I'm going to beat him out of you. Needless to say, when I left the church at 14, Beatty, when the last time she smacked me was when I was about 14. I was already in gangs.
But you did miss the prom, though.
The welts were too great.
You couldn't go to the prom.
She beat me pretty badly. Really? The welts were all over me and I couldn't go. Now, at 14, when she tried to impose that sort of dynamic on me again. That sort of, I said, Mommy, I'm not going. I grabbed her hand when she was going to smack me in my face. It's the last time you're going to smack me in my face. And the last time I'm going to church, I used to go 7 times a week, 3 times on Sunday, Beatty.
Wow.
So when I left the church, I became a freakazoid. I did everything. You name it, the drugs, the women, I did it all. And the sex. And it took me years to come back. I had 3 children, 1 child in marriage, 2 children out of wedlock, and the revolution caught me up. I was so caught up in, you know, because when
And this is mid-60s?
Mid-60s, I had gone to jail for a gang fight in which a kid died, and thank God I got out in enough time for me not to become institutionalized. But when I got out, I married this Nancy. We have a beautiful son. He's 43. And then I had 2 children out of wedlock. And I was leaving them for the revolution. I was so busy doing what I had to do in radio and television. I was on NBC. They tell me now, we missed you.
I'm sure they did.
We miss you. So what I've done in the last 10 years, thanks to my fiance, who has been on me a lot, telling me the most important thing you can do is have a healthy relationship with your children.
That's right.
And do you know who else told me that? Jackie Onassis. She said the most revolutionary thing you can do, Felipe, is raise healthy children. So I've gone, the revolution has been wonderful in terms of ideology. It does nothing for children. And if we want to raise healthy kids, if we want this country to be healthy, I agree with you, we better start talking to them about sexuality, talking to them about love. I kiss and hug every one of my children. In fact, my kids say, you are crazy. You're so mushy. I love them. I kiss them. Friends of mine who are revolutionaries don't understand. I kiss men. I kiss women. They can't. Well, I had a problem at Union for this because I go around kissing everybody. You're not supposed to do this, apparently. But I agree with you, Jim.
Pretty progressive place, too.
Yeah, well, it's not so progressive in terms of sex. It's they say the gender war is progressive. But to go around kissing people, that's not considered cool. And it caused me tremendous problems at Union because they said that I was harassing. But I kiss everybody. Everybody in my classroom I was kissing. It was an issue that almost caused me to get thrown out. I love hugging.
Hugs, yeah.
I love it. I hug men, I hug women, I hug gays, and so many of them in my family. To me, hug is exchanging energy.
Well, Cornell gets away with that all the time.
I love
He
hugging.
hugs.
I love hugging. Well, I almost got thrown out of Union for that. I had to fight it. Eventually, I left. But don't tell me how progressive Union is. It has its problems.
But can we circle back to maybe Winnipeg here? I mean, as Felipe's talking about the Pentecostals, you were in pretty strict Orthodox Jewish. Was that some of the same things happening there up in Winnipeg? And in terms of sexual discussions and what was being talked about in family?
Certainly
with your family in particular?
Nothing in the family. But you know
no talking
about sex?
No.
Oh, absolutely not.
In your family or most of the Orthodox?
No, even in the non-Orthodox families. And I think that, as I was saying before, I think that people, Orthodox, non-Orthodox, Jewish, Christian, and I would think Muslim, people really are uptight about sex. They really are.
I had a very different background. I had a different, as you know, with my parents, my grandfathers, and we talked. My grandparents told me they had sex into their late 80s.
God bless them.
And my grandmother said with great love they were married 68 years, and she said, "My Jacques, he can't do it anymore." But again about your age, 12, 13, I had conversations with my mother. And we won't get graphic, but I was able to tell her about some of the...
You were lucky. You were very fortunate.
Insecurities, and she said, she called me Jamie, that you're okay. You can...
I like that name, Jamie. I'm going to call you that from now on.
All right, but after
Jamie,
the show,
I like
Jamie,
it.
all right. But this is so important. I mean...
I think you had a very unique background in all kinds of ways.
It's so important.
Why is it that Asian cultures, from what I hear, the mothers teach their daughters that pleasing a man is important, not to the extent that you don't please yourself, but that pleasing a man is an art form. It's an art form. You see it in Arab culture, you see it in Chinese culture, you see it in Japanese culture, you see it in Middle Eastern culture. Why can't we do that? Why can't men learn how to please women? Because the wham, bam, thank you, ma'am, has been out since the 1900s. It's not happening anymore. And women will tell you, excuse me? Oh, you're not getting off this bed right now. In and out is not what's happening.
Exactly.
There is a
Some
fear.
academic studies have shown that particularly Jewish and black men do pay more attention to satisfying their women.
Well, I'll tell you. I'll be frank. And this is anecdotal.
Oh, go ahead.
I have found that there is much more free expression among white women than there is among black and brown. That's probably because of education and probably because of an openness of spirit.
In terms of
sexuality,
Okay,
it's now beginning to change. I see now more and more black and brown women who are open to new experiences and open to experimenting and open to a loving, sexual, erotically satisfying relationship. It's taken me. Sometimes women have shocked me. Puerto Rican women say, "What do you mean?" And I'm the one who's shocked. My fiance shocks me sometimes. I go like this. I'm the one who goes, "Wait a minute." But listen, it's important that we get beyond the physical, first of all. As I tell a lot of black and brown men, Beatty, you're just saying you had an affair and you're treating it so shabbily. Oh, I just did her. Don't you know that spiritually, your semen going into that woman's vagina is a spiritual act? You may not see it as such. And I'm not saying that you ought to bow down to it, but admit that you were smitten. Admit, I don't care if she was big and rotund. I don't care if she was thin and anemic. Something about that woman you liked. So don't come to this bar talking about your conquering spirit and how you took it off when you knew that when you come, you almost die. I've seen, and people are afraid of that. When you orgasm, you're flat out. You know, I'm surprised that people haven't used this as an assassination tool.
Think, you know, when you say smitten, I was thinking, you know, maybe the guy or maybe the woman was just plain horny. I mean, if you
could
look
be
at
that
what's
too.
going on,
Oh, you must never.
on the college campuses
Oh, yeah, you never.
Right now,
Yeah, you never say that.
You're looking at hookups.
Yes.
The women are frequently drunk and drugged by you know, because that's what they want to be doing. Nobody is forcing them. The guys are drunk and frequently using
and want to get it
drugs,
on.
and they want to get it on, and it's got nothing to do with being smitten or in love or having an affair.
But what is, Beatty, what
They
is
wanna
the
have sex.
Yeah, but what is the value system against that? That's fine. In African societies, by the way, you can have it's assumed that in some African societies, it's assumed, those who have not become Pentecostalized, it's assumed you're going to have sex and a child may emerge from that, but the family will take care of it. But it's assumed that you're going to have experimental sex in your adolescence. What is so sinful about that? That's insane that we're doing this to kids. You cannot have sex. You cannot do this.
Let alone experimental.
You can't. Oh my God!
What do you
Can't
mean
experiment.
experimental?
Touching, feeling. Well, I mean,
just what?
experimental sex means you just met and you're going out, your boyfriend and girlfriend, and you decide just to have sex because, as Beatty says, you're horny. Your hormones are raging at 12, 13, 14. They're raging. I remember in the Johnson projects, in the Foster projects, I was making, and in the Brownsville project, I was making out in the hallways. I mean, we couldn't do it in our homes. So we'd end up taking the lights out of the project hallways or going on the 13th floor, which is the roof, and having a ball. So you found out little things. You found out that this particular G-spot, I never knew about G-spot. I just knew that when I touched that particular spot.
But did you feel guilty about this?
I was going to
Oh,
ask
yeah,
the
because of your
same
background.
question.
Hell no.
You didn't.
Hell no. I would go. But remember that my guilt. What happened is that I didn't understand the aftermath. The aftermath, in terms of the responsibility of a man, is to be tender and to look at that woman in the same way you did before you had sex with her. That was always the sticking point. Because I would go play basketball. The next thing I was doing is shooting Skelly. I was, hey, what's happening, Carolyn, or whatever it was. And she would feel so hurt that I didn't give her the humanity.
Well, I coined a term many, many years ago, which is the biggest and the most important aphrodisiac for women. And that term is emotional foreplay. And every woman knows exactly what I'm talking about. The hugs, the kisses, you're beautiful, I like you, or I love you, and you know, I can't wait to be close. helping with, the dishes, the children. I mean, that's a turn on.
Yes, it is.
And then, of course, men need to understand that the majority of women need between 15 and 20 minutes of physical and sexual foreplay. And like you were saying, it's not just, thank you, ma'am, goodbye. It was all very nice, and, I'll see you next week. That doesn't do anything.
No, it doesn't.
For
And
women.
when you don't have men in your culture, you don't learn those things.
That's exactly right.
I didn't have a father. My father was
Okay.
gone when I was 3. And so I didn't understand the kissing on the cheek, or how are you, a nice caressing of the buttocks, and hi baby, how you doing? That kind of thing I didn't see. My mother, for example, who was Pentecostal, was not emotional outwardly. So I would have to go to her and hug her. Do you know what I mean? She wasn't she was a wonderful woman, and she did the best with what she could do.
And the church was a place
And
where
the
she
church,
could let loose in a way.
the church was the place where her orgasmic feelings could be ventilated, and her emotional feelings could be ventilated. I found that out later. And when I suggested that maybe she needed to go see my father when she was beating me, maybe she needed to go see my father to let go of that energy, she said, I said, go sleep with him, mommy. Go. She said, did you say sleep with, did you? My God. What do they call it? I lifted the Pandora's box. I almost got killed because I was telling the truth. She told me years later, I beat you because you were so smart, because you knew exactly what I was feeling. And she apologized to me before she died, that the beatings I got were just totally unnecessary because I was touching those spots. But remember, without men, it's difficult for you to think about foreplay.
Right.
You don't think about it.
Right.
I have just had to learn. I got reamed out by my lover because Thanksgiving, I traditionally, Puerto Rican men just sit and watch TV. We drink beers, we watch the games, we don't participate.
So insensitive.
Very. And she and her daughter were doing it, and we got into a huge argument over this. And she told me later, you did not help at all. And then you were asking me to do this for me. Could you do that? Because I'm a bit demanding. And I realized later that I had not helped one iota, didn't lift one plate, and there were 20 people in my house. Come on.
So did you learn something?
Oh, I did.
So for next Thanksgiving, you're
going
to be a helper.
I'm going to be helping her cook.
Good.
If she doesn't throw my ass out of the kitchen.
But Felipe had quite a, difficult, to put it mildly, background,
Would you
and he
call
came
it
out of
abusive?
it. Would you call it abusive? I was going to
If,
use that.
Would you call it abusive?
I'm going to say something that may provoke the wrath and ire of many people of color in this city and in this country. If there were child abuse laws in effect in the 50s, most of our mothers would be not in the jail but under the jail.
Yes.
They would have thrown away the key. Because knocking a kid out was not considered inhumane. Beating him until he bled was not considered bad.
Is it changed now? Would you say in your culture?
A little bit, huh?
Has it changed?
It has changed, but slightly. To this day, we still see on television mothers who are beating their kids to death because they think their children are demon-possessed, or boyfriends who beat the children to death because they feel that the kids are crying too hard. We still have an enormous amount of education to do. However, and here's the hopeful point, Beatty, I have seen more Latino men with their children on the streets of East Harlem than I've ever seen in my life. And every time I see one with his stroller and taking his girl or his little boy, I tell him, man, thank you so much. It's so wonderful seeing this. So I see many more black and brown men who are taking it upon themselves to be role models to their children first. I'm not interested in the politics. I'm not interested in you being a political leader. I'm interested in you being a father and a man.
Would you say more Latinos than African Americans? Because, we know the statistics. 1 in 3 African American men are in prison, so they're not
1 in
around.
37
but there's almost a
Hispanic
disproportionate number of Latinos, too. We, with blacks and, let's say, Puerto Ricans, which is the subject I know best, because I've been in this community for all of these years, more than 60 years, we are so intertwined that it's impossible almost to separate. We have a unique cultural perspective. I, as a black Puerto Rican, have a cultural perspective that is different, maybe from an African American. However, we are bound at the hip. And I have found that the instances of love and true fatherhood is the same. That is, the rate is the same proportionately, proportionate as African Americans. And even when those guys come out of jail, I have seen them trying. I just gave a lecture at a place called Exodus House, and these were all Puerto Ricans, and you could see that they're really trying, that they want. It takes a little while to get past the criminal curve,
Of course.
because it's so attractive.
Absolutely.
It's so attractive. It really is.
No.
And profitable for a minute.
I know. Yes.
For a minute. We get caught up in the okie doke, and we think this is fast money. And Beatty, the moment you get busted and you get 10 to 20 years, at the end of the 10-year cycle, you hit your head and say, I should have had a V8. But it's too late. You've already served the time. The interesting study would be, Beatty, the sexuality with regard to men who've been incarcerated for a number of years. Because that has to be hard.
I would think.
It's like a guy coming back from Afghanistan after 6 tours. What do? You're used to action. You're used to war, as a guy in jail is used to.
Yeah.
So what they're going to is post-traumatic stress disorder as well,
course.
which affects your
From the
sexuality.
abuse that they've had in the institution.
Precisely.
Of course.
But if we can, and I know that we're taping this on the date of your mother's.
Yurtsite. My mother
Yurtsite.
died 11 years ago, but she was 98.
God
And
bless
she
you.
was a strong.
She was amazing. I mean,
what
at
was
90.
her viewpoint of sexuality and?
Oh, it was
and
never.
love
It was
and-
never
in the-
discussed.
Yes.
It was
in your house.
sexuality was never, ever, ever discussed. And I had a wonderful relationship with my father, who was totally emotionally there, and who was my coach in sports. I competed nationally in tennis and different sports, but the subject of sex was never, ever talked about.
Again, what just.
It was
you
dirty.
never-
It was
dirty again,
not.
that-
It was not okay. It was not okay. I never had any, in quotes, sex education training. I would read books. And what was so interesting is that when I was a little girl, and you've heard me tell the story
Yes,
so
go
many
ahead.
times, my parents, they bought me a transistor radio. Now, how I figured this out, I will never know, but at 12 o'clock midnight on Sunday night, there was a show called Ask the Pastor, and it was a call-in counseling radio talk show. I mean, all these years later, I've
From God
hosted
knows
call-in
where, right? This
counseling from Winnipeg.
The pastor was from Winnipeg.
The
and
pastor
planes
was from
and whatever.
Winnipeg, and people would call
Okay.
in with their marriage problems
At
and their
midnight.
sex problems. And here was little Beatty. I'm taking all of
5
this
years
in.
old,
And
yeah.
then so many years later, I mean, I've hosted call-in counseling radio talk shows. And so that was how I learned about
Wow.
relationships and sex. And I would read all of these romance books and these
Yeah.
magazines.
Novellas
And I
and-
think that, I had a very healthy sexual appetite when I was a little girl. But it was never, ever from talking about sex with
Adults.
with adults, with my friends.
And the
Yes.
physical attention was not really there in the house between your mother and father either.
No, not at all.
Really?
Not at all.
Right.
No.
So
What was
she
that
experienced
about?
some of the-
Well, my mother met my father through a relative, and my father was in the Canadian Army.
Was it an arranged marriage?
Well, not exactly, but my father was in the Army in Europe in World War II, and my mother knew his sister, and they corresponded, and then when he came back, they got married. My mother had me when she was 40 years old.
I mean,
Yeah, which
my
was
God.
really late in
Yes,
life.
it-
I think
at
I
that
was the
time.
Immaculate Conception, frankly. I really was the Immaculate Conception.
they got married right
I
after
love it.
he came back
They
from the
did.
war. So
They
Huh,
did.
okay.
They did. And I think my father would have liked to have a much more physical, emotional kind of relationship with my mom, but that is not who she was.
Well, I'll tell you something. For me, my college years from 66 to 68 were among the most enjoyable, and I'll tell you why.
I bet.
It was Jewish girlfriends who opened me up sexually.
Interesting.
They were the ones who told me, you can leave the light on.
Uh-huh.
They were the ones who told me, can we do this without standing up? They were the ones who told me, let me play with you. Let me play with you. I played,
Yeah,
I was the repressed one.
Wait, you were, where was this? Queen? you
This
were-
was Queens College.
All right,
And I
so-
met this woman called Judy Trop, and may she rest in peace. She's now passed. Her father was a Reichian, Wilhelm Reich.
Okay.
And he believed in orgone energy, and he believed in free sexuality, and that there was no reason to repress anything. And we would have so much fun in bed. And she was never really jealous. She was a wonderful, wonderful soul, because I'd be talking to black girls on campus, and I'd be talking to, and she would say, "That's all right. I know that when you get real horny and when you really want to express yourself, you're going to have to come to me." She lived on 110th Street. By the way, and this is a parenthetical phrase, when I was running underground in the Young Lords, and when I had to find somewhere to a safe sanctuary, she took me in.
Wow.
Along with a bodyguard, Pi Diaz. So I'll never forget her for that. She was tremendously revolutionary, a Jewish woman. There was another woman, I won't mention her name because I don't know if she's still alive, but she was a professor of mine in college. And I had a wonderful time with her. There were so many Jewish American women who had liberal households. They came out of liberal households. And I would go to their homes, and I loved it because their mothers would not go into their rooms. They would not. Or they would say, "Ellen."
Yeah.
That didn't happen in a Puerto Rican home. Mothers could, first of all, you can't be in a room with another girl. But they wouldn't bother us, and we'd be humping and humping with the mother and the father downstairs. I loved it. It was open.
I bet you did.
Took me a little while.
Should we say a little? I mean, Beatty and I first met when we were 19 or so, and we'll.
Whoa, back up.
Well, we took a couple of detours.
Back up. You met when you were 19?
We did.
Yes.
But we had many
wilds of
detours,
Colorado.
and we lived our lives separately, and we just got married in May.
Did you like her when you first met
Oh,
her?
come on! Of course.
Did you like her?
Please.
So did you guys do it?
Yeah, we did,
Not
actually.
only what I was going to get into. I
We
came to
did.
New York for graduate school, but the point is, we stayed with my
Grandparents.
my revolutionary, radical, bohemian
And never could
artist
sleep,
grandparents.
But could you sleep together?
Of course we could.
We could, and
Because my grandfather
irony-
checked, she was Jewish. It was okay.
It's okay,
I
as
was-
long as she's Jewish.
As long as I
And
was
she
Jewish.
was-
As long as she's kosher, you can sleep there.
Absolutely. Well,
The thing that is so interesting is that we got married this past May.
and we live in the same
But it
place.
only took 60 years. I'm
No,
trying to figure out.
We had no contact for 40
But
years.
we're living in
And
the
we
same
40
live-
years.
place.
And we live in the same apartment where we lived with his
My
grandparents.
grandparents' place.
Oh my God.
So it
same-
is, yeah, it is. Oh
We've
my
come
God
full
thing.
circle.
So you took her when
and-
she was a baby.
Or I took
God.
him. I'm not
I was
sure.
ready. Yeah, no.
I'm not sure who
and
took
then she,
who.
I love
was,
it.
I was in grad school, and I had a $7 a week place, a sleeping room,
I wouldn't-
107th
which
Street.
I wouldn't
She
stay in.
came, and there's a wonderful little Jewish princess, which is wonderful part of her. She says, "We're not staying here." She just knocked on the door, and we took off around the city.
Jim,
and all
let
kinds
me
of-
tell you
yeah.
something.
Anyway, okay.
Sometimes we have to admit that as males we have visions of grandeur and visions of and we'll sacrifice. Women sometimes,
Yeah.
most times,
Where you
are the
going with
ones who
this?
make us vertically mobile.
Yeah.
I think that's true.
If it's up to us, we could stay in our little hovels of sexuality, stay in our little hovels of financial attainment for the rest of our lives. It's women who say, "I think we've got to get out of this." So she told you, "I'm not going to stay here."
Yeah.
Right,
You have to move on.
right.
Yeah. Well,
We were
no, she
talking the
was
other
right
day
on
in the
that. Yeah,
diner.
yeah, okay.
In the diner. Remember, we were talking in the
Yeah,
diner,
yeah.
and I said,
Yes,
"James."
Yeah.
He wore a jacket today, which I love.
Yeah,
I said,
the
"James,
jacket,
we've
yeah.
got to change your uniform."
Yes.
On
We're
the
going to
boat.
go shopping.
We're going to go shopping.
We are gonna
Did
go
you see
shopping.
his face? He
Yes.
said, "I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to talk about
We
it."
had other things to talk
Yeah,
about.
we
will.
talking
We'll-
about.
okay.
So but you
you
said
two are
yes.
fashion
You
folks,
have to
yeah.
move. No, it's not that, Papa. We
I
just
know.
want you to look at. You're a good-looking
We're gonna
man.
do
You
that.
still
We're
have all
gonna
your
do-
hair.
We're gonna do the most. of them.
Why not?
All right.
And
Right.
he went. Have you don't stay on him, he's not going to move. I do the same thing with my fiance. I could stay in my apartment with tons of laundry, tons all over the place. She's the one who says, oh no, it smells." So she comes in and she throws the things, she puts the things in the laundry.
Same here,
And
yeah,
she says, "I'm going to do the laundry." She says, "Now, as I'm watching television, and this is my only activity, this is my muscular activity with the remote." And she says, "Get your butt up." I'm going to use the other word.
Good for her.
And we're going, and you're going to bring this stuff with me. And I go downstairs, and if it wasn't for the women in our lives, where would we be?
I think you would have to acknowledge that, right?
Certainly, absolutely. I really
Yes.
wish I had spent most of my life with you. I mean, I was ready at the time, and I was a pretty serious graduate student and so on. But it wasn't. The timing is very important.
Oh, we were
But I
very
think-
young, and I went back to Canada and lived my life.
Yeah,
I
we
mean,
lived,
you
and so
know,
anyway, look.
So can we get some juice out of this? Did you jump him?
we jumped each other.
I like it. I like it.
Well, I think you know.
I cannot see Jim as being, and I love him.
No, yeah,
I
I love
adore
you.
Jim
Yeah,
Vrettos.
yeah.
I cannot see him as being a madman. Do you know what I mean? Come here, you know. I can't see him being Neanderthal.
She was more.
He's a caveman, isn't he?
Well, I think that
I am,
you
but-
may
but-
be surprised.
Yeah, that's right.
You
You're being
animal,
surprised.
you.
Yeah,
You
but-
animal.
She certainly did her part too, more than her part on that. No,
But to get
It
back
was-
to our point about sexuality, Jim,
Yeah,
the
yeah.
moment that we begin, the left, which has a tendency, A, to shoot itself in the foot, B, not provide a familial basis for revolution. The revolution is not only to provide an economic system that provides for the sustenance of life and the pursuit of happiness for all Americans.
Absolutely.
It's also to provide a solid foundation for children.
Yeah.
We cannot continue in this nation state doing this and leaving
Absolutely.
public schools
Absolutely.
by themselves. Public schools are dying right now, and the person that Trump has just put in charge of public
Terrible,
education
terrible.
is about charter schools.
Right.
We are in deep trouble. We cannot have a guy who's in charge of Exxon as Secretary of State. The conflicts of interest are crazy. We cannot have on and on it goes. They have a guy now who is so much a believer in the settlements in Israel that it shocked everybody.
Yeah,
Even
Friedman.
American Jews
Yeah.
were shocked by this guy.
Yeah, very much.
I mean,
Yeah.
right now, the United States has just said, Obama just said in one of his last acts, I'm going to abstain, big act for the United States, I'm going to abstain from the vote on the censure of, on Israel moving into the West Bank.
Yeah.
It is
The illegal
we
settlement.
already said the West Bank and Gaza is theirs. Why would you want to encroach more on them if you don't want another intifada?
But-
and Netanyahu came
Yeah,
out with his
yeah,
right-wing
yeah.
rhetoric. Jewish Americans who I know who are progressive couldn't believe it. They said,
Yeah.
this guy's the worst thing.
Yeah.
Now Israel is going through a tremendous, a lot of nations have already rejected it.
Right.
They say this is wrong for you to do. This is serious
Again,
business. And by the way,
self-destructive, yeah.
speaking about the government of Israel, has nothing to do with the people of Israel, whom I love. And sometimes they equate the two and they try to say you're anti-Semitic.
Yeah.
I love the
Bullshit,
Jewish
yeah.
culture. I love Jewish tradition. I have 3 Torahs in my house. I love Judaism and I love Jews. But the government, it's like saying, I hate the American government, I hate the American people. No, if you hate the American government, you can't hate the American people because they're wonderful. Do you understand the
But
difference?
of course. But
Of course.
both of you, is this distorted visions of masculinity and sexuality being played out in this macho sort of aggressive way? I mean,
We have to do
to
a
dominate,
much-
to control.
We have to
that's
do-
all what Trump is doing, and so much of it is appealing to who? The men who are also frustrated in being able to take care of themselves and their family. It's so distorted.
But this
Would you
is
say?
why I agree. We have
Yeah.
to do a much better job at
The left and right.
teaching little boys what it means to be a man, and that it is not, this macho Donald Trump persona.
And you tried doing that in part, right?
Well,
in Canada.
well, I
She's
was.
much more
We were.
open
We
to
were. So much more progressive. I ran with 2 other women the entire school social services program for Greater Montreal.
Stop it.
Hundreds of schools. I had a huge staff. And beginning in kindergarten, I designed and was able to implement, and of course money was not an issue, funding was not an issue, relationship education programs beginning with kids who were 5 years old, and took them through how do you express anger.
You said
well
5 years
and-
old. It
Yes,
starts- wow.
at kindergarten,
That's
at
right.
a
Starts
kindergarten
even
level.
before that. Yeah.
Right, and we were able to, within the educational system, really help the kids deal with what I believe are the most important issues in our life, which is love and relationships and how do you express
Yes.
emotion and communication and problem solving. I mean, people, they end up as an adults. They don't have these kinds of skills.
You know
Nobody
something,
ever
Beatty?
taught us any of
It's
this.
scary you're bringing this up. I was talking to my partner today, and I said, why am I feeling strange right now? And I had just gotten some bad news. And she said, because you got the bad news. Somehow I couldn't equate my feelings of sadness with, there's a disconnect
There's
in
a
American men.
Yes.
We don't know when we're feeling sad. We don't know why we're feeling sad. We don't know why we're drinking too much or drugging too much, or staying in bed too much, or being abusive too much. We
Right.
don't understand it. There's a connection between an empirical factor, something that happened in the real world,
Always.
and its impact on you.
Always.
By the same token, there has been an emphasis in post-feminism on the aggression or the assertiveness of little boys. And I have seen the deleterious effects of that on boys. Rough and tumble play is normal for kids, especially young boys. I believe, this is what I believe, that men and women are wired differently. The DNA, through the evolution of time, has caused, because we were hunters and we were gatherers, caused us to be more warrior-like. Now, that doesn't mean that women cannot be warriors, but I truly believe that in each species, there's a warrior class that's there to defend and protect the culture, particularly the family. Post-feminism has moved it to another level. When you look at the kids over the last 30 years, you see men who don't have a mission. They don't understand that there is a role for them to play in this world. They feel insignificant. They feel not loved. They feel isolated. And you see them acting out starting in the 3rd grade. And you say to yourself, what's going on? And meanwhile, in the same community, you see women with different messages. Not to say that they're not racist and that they're not oppressive, but you see women being able to move a little further than the guys, economically, for example,
Absolutely.
and even emotionally, because they've been given, in America, a different mission. They've been given a different prayer. These young men are being slowly killed in spirit, so that their sexuality takes on a rapist culture as opposed to a love, I like you, let's do this. There's a difference between being a man and saying, I want you, and being a rapist. Do you so one is power and the other is sexuality and eroticism. And I think that we have to begin to criticize and look seriously at post-feminist culture and how it destroys men, destroys little boys on any level. Now you cannot, sexual touching, for example. Do you know 4-year-olds and 5-year-olds are being taken out of schools because they touched a girl? Wait a minute. This is normal. This is normal. He doesn't know. Why are you going to put him and give him a record because he touched a girl? Let's be, I'm not discussing rape now. I'm not discussing in the hallways.
Yeah, right.
I'm discussing normal.
So normal interaction if you let it happen.
We have demonized sexuality. But more than that, we've demonized the male species. And I think that is beginning to have a horrible effect on America and on men, and on American men in general. We need to be together. We need to have, that is part and parcel of being a man. And so the same way as in, what's the South Pacific, where she says, I enjoy being a girl.
Oh, yes.
Why can't men say I enjoy being a man? What is so wrong about that? And now with our super sensitive culture with regard to LGBT and women's culture and women's feminist culture, guys are afraid to say, hey, I'm a man. And it's okay for you to be gay. It's okay for you to be transgender.
Right,
but
right.
don't make me abnormal. I'm normal. This is what I feel. Yeah. You are normal being who you are, but I'm not to feel abnormal. I shouldn't feel abnormal for being a man, for being black, for being Puerto Rican, for being a Christian. Something is wrong when you demonize other things that are not familiar to you. And I think it's you should see what's happening on these streets. I see it all the time. The sexual confusion. And you know, at 12, 13, you don't know really who you are. That's why kids go into Boy Scouts. It's homoerotic.
Well, and
in its
that's
own
why
way.
kids, I mean, that's why we need to do a much better job in our educational system. All of what we're talking about are
be in the
things that should
schools.
be talked
That's
about
right.
in the school.
But are not.
I mean, what
But why
is
can't
more
they?
important?
But in schools,
At
yes.
some
But
place.
shouldn't families be talking about it as well?
Families are
Sure,
not going to
but-
talk about it. They should
But
be,
why are
they
we giving
don't.
the state?
They
Here's
don't.
where
Because
here's
you know
where
the
I'm-
men aren't at
They
home.
don't.
And
But you cannot give the power of yourself, the power of spirit, to the institution. Here's where I understand. I do not agree with the Republicans on this, but I understand. Why should the school take on the responsibility of family?
Because the
Why?
parents aren't doing it. So where are the
But
kids
then,
going to
both-
learn it?
but then how
Both
do
should
but
do
then
it.
how do we approach the family
We
so
need-
that we can begin to talk in social welfare terms How do we begin to talk to the family in those homes, in
Yeah,
those
and
projects,
they're not
in those
threatened.
tenements, and say, hey, we're social workers. We'd like to talk to you about sex.
We need to teach the families
There you go.
how to do all of this, and,
And open them up in
if they
ways.
don't, the kids need to have an opportunity
I agree.
to learn some of
I
this
agree.
somewhere.
And the
if
truth
not
is,
at
Jim,
home.
do you know where I learned all of this stuff? In the public school.
And I did too, and I remember holding Carol E. Mines' hand in first grade. And that was okay, my God. But listen, we are
Out of time.
out of time here.
Already?
And this has just been spectacular. I love you both so very, very much.
Thank you so much,
very,
Mary.
very much.
Thank you.
In beginning this topic that I think is so important, I'm so glad we got a chance to do this. It's so important for the left to understand this, and clinically,
And the right.
and the
And the middle.
and everybody. You're right.
Yes.
But particularly because Felipe and I've been in this.
Yeah, we've been in this
a long time.
time.
We know what damage they can do for this. But listen, thank you so very, very much. This is Jim Vrettos again. We'll see you next week on The Radical Imagination. Thank you so much, Felipe and Beatty.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It was wonderful.